Hi guys, hold on for a second. Before we proceed to the video, I have something very important to tell you. Professor John V. has published his new book in collaboration with Little French Media, and the title of the book is Neoliberalism, Inequality, and Authoritarianism. This book details how neoliberalism impacts the geopolitical economy in the 21st century. You can buy it from Amazon, and the link is in the description. Thank you. Now let's proceed to the video.
Hello everyone, welcome to an introductory teaser session on a longer analytical video about freedom of expression in the United States and the new definition that has been launched, especially in the second Trump administration. And it has attracted attention from various sources, not just mainstream journalism and independent journalism, social media, but constitutional lawyers, constitutional scholars. It has attracted attention on the part of political scientists, historians, social scientists that deal with the issue of freedom of the press in its historical sense, what it means with its roots in the liberal philosophy of John Locke and 18th century Enlightenment era ideals. And after all, let's keep in mind the Constitution of the United States, with its First Amendment guaranteeing freedom of expression, was, of course, it took place, of course, in the late 18th century. So it's in the context of the Enlightenment that the United States as a nation state, as a republic, was founded. The issue of freedom of expression, of course, is one that is controversial because under the neoliberal right-wing populists, especially because they are trying to redefine what freedom of expression means within the social contract of neoliberal populist authoritarianism only. It is true that freedom of speech has been defined throughout modern history by different countries within the social contract and constitutional framework of each country. So one could argue that even totalitarian societies, in other words, even Stalin's Soviet Union, Hitler's Third Reich, and Mussolini's fascist Italy, had freedom of expression as long as it conformed to the regime's guidelines and it did not go outside of those guidelines, to use the famous or infamous, if you will, slogan of fascist Italy: everything within the state, nothing against the state, nothing outside the state. So as long as you were within those boundaries, of course, you could express yourself freely. Once you went outside those boundaries and became a dissident, looking at the regime from the outside and criticizing its shortcomings on the basis of another set of values and ideology, namely liberalism, for example, then you were an enemy of the freedom of expression that social contract offered. And this is exactly what's going on today. What we have is a concerted effort on the part of populist right wingers in the neoliberal vein, of course, on a world scale, not just in the United States. However, because the United States is a superpower, because the United States has such visibility on a world scale, and because it commands headlines globally, and obviously the cult of personality that the Trump administration has built around the individual in charge, and now, of course, with someone who is right next to that individual, and just happens to be the world's richest individual, namely Elon Musk, also attacking, of course, the traditional 18th century Enlightenment vision of the founding fathers of what constitutes freedom of expression. So, in the longer analytical video, I go through a number of subtopics about this issue um, to uh, decide exactly what is it that these people want. For example, let me just give you a headline that is recent, uh, very important headline, namely the Department of Defense in the United States just a couple of days ago was hinting that it may actually do away with women in leadership positions in the Department of Defense. Now, that's not as if that's not a controversial issue, I don't know what is. It's certainly more controversial than the Associated Press using the name Gulf of Mexico rather than conforming to the Trump administration's Gulf of America, uh, rebaptizing the Gulf. Um, that's innocuous in comparison to someone, the press, namely, coming out and saying this is sexism, this is in defiance of a multicultural, multidimensional society that is inclusive and based on equity and gender rights. That criticism, according to the new definition that we have here by these people based on their ideology only. And remember, it's only within the confines of their ideology that they accept any definition of freedom of expression. Attacking that would be denying them their freedom of expression. Okay. And this is exactly what the Vice President of the United States more or less said, not about this issue, but when he went to Munich and spoke, basically lectured, I shouldn't say spoke, the European leaders in February, on 25th of February 2025, they were shocked that he was lecturing them on freedom of expression and that he insisted that the European governments are denying freedom of expression to those who are in the right-wing populist camp, who are opposed to migrants coming into Europe, who are against diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, the multicultural makeup of modern 21st century society. Obviously, the Europeans operated on the liberal democratic model of the Enlightenment, just like the US. They too come out of that tradition. After all, the Enlightenment was based in Western Europe. In fact, Paris was the center of the age of the Enlightenment. And so they were listening to this, dumbfounded that they were criticized from the far right about denying the far right freedom of expression, which to them included inciting violence, mass violence, division in society, hate speech, allowing hate speech, criticizing hate speech, and punishing hate speech, and so forth. And so this created a sort of controversy, and on a world scale, a number of people began to write about this. Is this a new definition of freedom of expression, permitting only this definition, which means that if you criticize that, then you're outside the perimeters, a dissident, in other words, and therefore you are the enemy of the freedom of expression. So turning the whole issue of freedom of speech upside down. The First Amendment, in the case of the United States and all Western countries, modern countries, all of them have some version of the American First Amendment. Now, just for the record, I should tell you, by the way, that J.D. Vance, perhaps is unaware that the United States does not rank very highly, even within the perimeters of a liberal democracy on a world scale, based on independent studies that have been conducted. It ranks, in fact, the among the very bottom within of the developed countries. It ranks from 20th to 25th um, in the world, rather than among the top 10, let's say, in freedom of speech, freedom of expression. On social justice, it's even worse, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. It ranks 36th out of 41 countries surveyed. That's a very low ranking on social justice. And it ranks 59th in the world in human rights. So these are not rankings to be proud of. And these are not rankings that one could argue give license to someone, especially coming from the right and encouraging the liberal center right, center centrists, the centrists, and the center right, to be more respectful and deferential to the far right um, about freedom of expression. The United States, of course, is indeed undergoing very rapid changes in this second Trump administration, and it is not surprising that it is attacking those who are not within the framework of the neoliberal far right populist camp, like Trump and um, Musk and the billionaire class and the people supporting this particular group that is in charge of the government right now. Clearly, none of this would be happening, none of it would be happening if the Democratic Party had been more democratic, exactly as Senator Sanders and others have stated, in terms of social justice and in terms of promoting peace and diplomacy in the world rather than militarism and socioeconomic inequality that prompted the voters either to stay home or a number of them to vote for the far right. So this is not to argue that there are angels on one side, namely the Democrats. Far from it, by the way. They are just as responsible for the condition we're in, that we have the issue of relativism, the tactic, I should say, not the issue, the tactic of relativism being hijacked by the far right populists on the matter of freedom of expression, and used as a vehicle to criticize the critics of the far right and to marginalize them, and to use it in such a way as to tell the people, here we are, we're the victims, we the far right, who, by the way, are the people conducting policy in Washington D.C. during the under the Trump administration. You see, they're not allowing us to have free speech, and they, like Vance, went to Europe and criticized the governments there. You're not allowing the far right to have its freedom to criticize the multicultural basis of European society. I invite you to view the longer tape, the longer video, on the rather on the issue of freedom of expression and its new definition. It's undergoing a new definition in a new society where the billionaire class and the multimillionaires on a world scale are indeed terrified of the old 18th century Enlightenment ideal based on liberal democracy, and they have come closer and closer to the version that administrations like that of Trump today are promoting. I thank you. I ask you to write questions, comments, and by all means, please join this channel managed by my very good friend Asad Alim. Thank you very much.